Kokonoe Toru, just an ordinary magic student, or at least that's what he wanted to be. However, for whatever reason, powerful girls continue to flock to him one way or another, but underneath that reputation is a total disaster. Our story begins on the beginning of another scholar year in Koiryu Academy, where the loser for today's story, Kokonoe Toru, took notice of a certain Sigtuna Julie staring at the sky, before getting startled by a new student, Nagakura Imari, who decided to tag along and become friends with Kokonoe in their journey to discover this utopian high school, where they don't have to pay for any fees of any kind, something we couldn't relate to. By the time these two new classmates reached the school building itself, Imari remembered to introduce herself, with Kokonoe following suit before heading to where the opening ceremony will take place. It was there where the opening ceremony speech was delivered by your dream goth girl, Tsukumo Sakuya, who happened to be the student council president. To everybody's surprise, Tsukumo's order for the day was getting every two partners in this school to fight each other, just to get the winners to stay and kick the losers outside. Seeing that no one was pleased with this, Tsukumo called that out as Koiryu's entrance exam, since all students will be plunging headfirst into battle before long. Kokonoe tried to persuade Tsukumo to choose other partners, but Imari was fine with the idea. And so the dueling session began, as Tsukumo declared that everyone had received their blaze to use it as their weapon to secure their position in this battlefield of a high school. Julie didn't hesitate to use her blaze to summon her weapons and fight her opponent, which made other students such as Takabana Tamo, Torasaki Aoi and Tatsuno Ryutaro, and many others joining the fray see for Kokonoe and Imari. Kokonoe in particular was traumatized by his past, but Imari still was determined to follow her dreams. Seeing that Kokonoe wasn't eager to use his blaze, Imari pulled hers out and fought the boy. Despite her best efforts, she couldn't come close to scratching Kokonoe. And nowhere close to getting him to use his blaze either. It only needed an unintentional attack from another student that Kokonoe used his own, which turned out to everyone's surprise to be a shield. Nevertheless, Imari got back to attacking him. This time, Kokonoe repelled her attack and punched her, just like Saitama, except he has hair. This victory came just in the nick of time. Tsukumo declared a few seconds later that the time limit is over, and that only victors are now allowed to step in. To Imari's surprise, no one was physically hurt despite the intensity of the fighting. However, Imari was also upset at Kokonoe for holding back, to which Kokonoe made it clear that he could have hurted her for real if he didn't hold back. Nevertheless, Imari didn't hold a personal grudge against him, as she congratulated Kokonoe and urged him to keep on doing his best to stay here, before parting ways with him, never to be seen again. Now that farewells had been made, the victors entered school. It was there that Kokonoe met with Torasaki, who had never expected to see him being another guinea pig for Sakuya Tsukumo, just like himself and all the other victors. In fact, Torasaki figured that the academy is being a huge research facility to test Blaze on its students. Once they got in class, they were, just like the rest of their classmates, in awe of the presence of Julie, as if she was some sort of a diva in the eyes of these simps. If that wasn't enough, Julie turned out to know Kokonoe. For his part, Kokonoe was reluctant to talk to her initially, but when he did, Julie turned her back immediately, as if she wasn't staring at him since her arrival earlier. This staring contest lasted for a bit more, until the homeroom teacher got to Leroy Jenkins her way into the room through the window. She thought that everyone was impressed by how cute she was, but in reality, everyone was speechless by the absurdity of their homeroom teacher. While Julie, on the other hand, kept on staring at Kokonoe, who was in turn staring at Professor Bunbun. After a lot of staring at the twin hills that this bunny woman has, everyone proceeded to introduce themselves, starting with Takabana, then Hataka, Torasaki all the way down to Kokonoe, who was immediately identified as that irregular. Julie introduced herself afterward, before getting back to her avoid-looking Kokonoe game once more. Aside from that, Professor Bunbun proceeded to tell everyone about how this school works, from how student ID can be used to the fact that each student here has up to 100,000 yen every month, before outright asking the boys in her class to feel free to donate her some money to help her with her modeling career. Absurdity aside, Bunbun taught everyone that the reason they're forming duos here is to get used to it before entering the Dorn Agency's peacekeeping corps once they graduate. As such, duos here will have to do everything together, literally. For that end, Bunbun declared that duos will have to be discussed and decided officially by the weekend, so until then, everyone will be organized in temporary duos. How will these temporary duos be made? Simple, it's through the same way as the opening ceremony. The person sitting next to you will be your partner. In other words, Kokonoe's partner in this case will be none other than the diva herself, Julie. Kokonoe argued against it, but Bunbun refused, as she reminded him that no one is allowed to reside with each duo. I hope that that's self-explanatory, because God forbid if I'll discuss any details. Needless to say, this made Kokonoe argue even more about not wanting to pair up with Julie, only to realize how futile his protests were. That night, Kokono tried to stay at Torasaki's room but found himself thrown out and lectured about becoming an alpha male. Left with no other options, Kokono began to contemplate speaking German the moment he entered his room. Once he grew a pair, Kokono entered the room and found no one at first, before Julie appeared behind him in what she believed was pajamas. After the god knows what round of panic Kokono went through, he reintroduced himself properly, only to realize that Julie didn't only remember who he is, but he also learned that she's from the land of IKEA and meatballs. Before he knew it, Kokono found Julie way too close to him, calling out his first name, expressing how interested she was in him as she further approached him, before attempting to punch him. It turned out that Julie took interest in his screening earlier during the rite, and now she wants to learn it. As she learned that this skill cannot be taught, Julie was already getting sleepy. Before she knew it, she fell asleep on Kokono's lap, who took her to bed. Seeing that he couldn't sleep, Kokono decided to make some apple tea, which woke the sleepy Julie up. As the two sat to pretend to be British, they began to look forward to each other's company. The next morning, Kokono was shocked at the sight of Julie sleeping next to him in bed. The day was merely starting for Kokono, however, as he still had to deal with the rumors of himself as an irregular. Nevertheless, Julie didn't care about any of that. As they sat to have their breakfast, the duo found themselves joined by Takabana and Hataka. Before he knew it, Hataka was turning red and hiding her face from Kokono. But it was no problem for the guy, as he figured that she's being the same as Julie yesterday. In fact, Takabana and Hataka came in for they were worried about Kokono and Julie since they're living together. Julie tried to clear all doubts but only made things a lot worse with her wording, which made Kokono rush to explain that things are not what they seem to be, just like me getting caught cheating on my barber, which ended up going horribly wrong anyway. Later in class, Professor Bunbun was busy teaching her students about the physical and mental effects of lucifers, the definition of blaze, and the exceeds. She did that by calling out a certain nerd, a girl with two massive soft hills, and a cohabitating irregular, who didn't like being called as such, which attracted the attention of the rest of the class, including one angry Takabana. Ironically, Julie was oblivious to the reason behind Takabana's anger, and became aware of it only after Kokono explained to her what the word embrace meant, so she decided to tell Takabana that the whole spiel was nothing short of a misunderstanding. Despite being relatively good at speaking Japanese, Kokono realized that Julie is awful at writing. While the guy was making some new discoveries of personal aspects of this IKEA girl's personality, Professor Bunbun kept on calling other students with fun names, such as Tatsuno Ruitaru being called as the Barbarian, for his peak alpha male physique, shocking the rest of the class for being able to understand his body gestures, before proceeding to mention that physical training is part of the student's curriculum. Bunbun also taught these offsprings about the rite of sublimation and other events related to school, which definitely needs students to be in top shape physically, because if they fail going up a single level all year, they'll be expelled. Horrified by such a prospect, the students decided to abide by the school code. Eventually at the school's dojo, Takanaba begged Kokono for forgiveness for the earlier misunderstanding in front of the entire class, to which it took him a while to convince her that he accepted her apology. Just as she was about to stand up after her extensive apology, Takabana slipped and fell over Kokono in the most unimaginable way. To make matters worse, Julie arrived to see the end result, only to conclude that the two were training on pinning techniques. Eventually, Takabana and Julie began their training in the most intense way possible, much to everyone's surprise. According to Torasaki, Takabana herself is coming from a family that's known for its deep-rooted history with martial arts. However, Torasaki was more interested in Hakata. Before he knew it, Kokono surprised Torasaki by his wish to have him and Julie teaming up together, before going to train together. Seeing that the two girls were done with training, Hataka expressed how impressed she was with their skills, which got her and the other two to be impressed by how skillful Kokono and Torasaki are. Once everyone was done with their training, Julie took a shower and had a cup of tea with Kokono, who learned that Julie is pretty much a self-taught person when it comes to her fighting skills. In exchange, Julie also learned that Kokono used to train a lot with Torasaki when they were kids, which was fun as much as it was today. This routine had persisted for a few more days, until the last evening before the duo application. It was then that Kokono became more seen as Julie's caretaker, since he's becoming increasingly attached to her, according to Torasaki. Once Kokono met Julie, he discussed with her their choices on who to pick as their partner tomorrow, which Julie had her eyes set on Takabana, while Kokono mentioned that he plans on teaming up with Torasaki, just like Julie had expected, before the two began to reminisce about the day they first met while watching Sakura trees. That night, Kokono woke up to find Julie sleeping next to him once again, only to learn that she's been lonely after her father left her to get the milk. The next morning, Kokono and Torasaki found the duo application office overcrowded, so they decided to come back later to apply. Kokono was pleased to see Julie and Takabana discussing their new partnership from afar. That evening, the boys went to the office to do the necessary procedure to become a duo. Just as they were about to recite their pledge, Takabana and Hataka arrived to officialize their own partnership. It turned out, Takabana had turned down Julie's offer to become a duo, so Kokonoe rushed to find where Julie was. After a while of searching, Kokonoe had one luck. There's only 1 hour left, and one place that he still didn't search yet, the top of the clock tower. Fortunately for him, Julie was indeed there, grieving in solitude about getting rejected by Takabana, only to be taken aback a moment later by Kokonoe's proposal to become a duo, assuring her that her problems are fixable. Julie's was wanting to become duos with Kokonoe, but her doubts were cleared only after he clearly stated his intentions to become partners with her. With that out of the way, the two finally pledged their oath of loyalty and became duos. Although Kokonoe still had issues with Julie sleeping right next to him instead of her own bed, but ended up relenting when Julie stated that he's someone as special to her as her father was, before falling asleep, oblivious to Bunbun singing on top of the dormitory's roof. The next morning, Bunbun was impressed that on top of the entire class reaching a consensus over who their teammates were, there were also some duos that remained together. Julie figured that the professor was talking about her and Kokonoe, who went on full panic mode in fear of his partner getting her words misinterpreted. Fortunately for him, Bunbun didn't mind the reasoning and proceeded in her duty to teach this class. After all, they're first Navgaldius, where they will be fighting against everyone else. For that reason, both Kokonoe and his average IKEA enjoyer got to training, where Kokonoe found himself in a cold streak of 4 losses, and it seems that Julie knew why. Apparently Kokonoe was having a bad posture while using his armor, which made him unable to properly punch her too. So after deciding on naming his right fist after some Nordic myth, she began giving him some instructions over how to punch better. Kokonoe was cool with it, but he remained concerned that he might end up hurting others if he used his full might. That evening, Kokonoe arrived at the school stadium, where he noticed Hataka passing out from sheer exhaustion. When she woke up, she found that the guy was carrying her, and that he still insisted that she had to remain calm before ending up hurting herself, which she managed to not do on her way to the infirmary. It turned out that Hataka was not the brightest tool in the shed, so she became excited when she learned how viable she is for having a Lucifer, since only a handful are capable of that. Despite that, Hataka was aware of the gap between her and Julie and Takabin and the others when it comes to skills, so she opted to overwork herself if needed in hope of catching up. For his part, Kokonoe agreed with her approach, since gaining a good physique and working on the very basics will be a solid start to improve her fighting skills later. Nevertheless, he also advised her not to overdo it. After having a nightmare that night that got him to wake Julie from her beautiful slumber, Navgaldius started tomorrow. Everyone had been preparing themselves for this, and now is the time to put their skills up to the test. By the time everyone drew their blaze out, the event had effectively started. It didn't take long for Kokonoe and Julie to run into their first enemies, who were soundly defeated. The two then proceeded to defeat duos after duos, and not even the seduction attempted by some random duo could stop them. With 1 hour left and not many enemies left, Kokonoe decided to check for one last place they haven't been, the inside of the school building itself. As they got inside, the two were immediately welcomed by a chain attack from Takabana. She proved to be a tougher nut to crack than their previous matches, since she's a specialist in chain usage and martial arts such as judo. After setting the stage for Hataka to attack with a weapon that she can barely carry, it seemed like Kokonoe and Julie are now in a bad situation. However, Kokonoe managed to repel Hataka's attack, albeit he found it to be so powerful that it pushed him back briefly, which made him express his admiration for her power. While these two are enjoying their cliché school life happy conversation, Julie and Takabana were engaged in their own fight, where it took a while of indecisive fighting before Julie exploited an opportunity she got and defeated Takabana. With the losing duo admitting defeat and heading back home, Julie believed that they still got time for one last match. Kokonoe agreed and thought that it'd be best to have this match against Torasaki and Tatsuno. However, they were alerted by their screams. It turned out that the duo were assaulted mercilessly by none other than Professor Bunbun, whose real name was Tsukumi Rito. Fortunately for Kokonoe and Julie, they were lucky enough to dodge their professor's attack, who did that just like the rest of their teammates just because. Just as Kokonoe was horrified at the knowledge that he got injured by a blaze, Julie came in the nick of time to repel Tsukumi's attack, because she learned that a blaze can indeed be used to eliminate people as long as their user has such intent in the first place. On top of that, Tsukumi demonstrated that a blaze user can also be knocked unconscious for a day if their blaze is broken. By the time she was done with chit-chat, Tsukumi got back on the offensive once again. This time, her attacks became increasingly ferocious that she nearly eliminated Kokonoe, who was saved yet again by Julie. The young girl was only able to draw the teacher's attention to her, however, as she wasn't able to keep up with Tsukumi's strength. Fortunately for her, however, Kokonoe came in just in time to save Julie, but it didn't seem like he could hold her for long. Once Tsukumi began to castigate Kokonoe for being a weakling, a flashback of something similar he heard from his older brother invigorated him into delivering a powerful blow to Tsukumi, which she dodged by the skin of her teeth. Realizing that Tsukumi overpowers them both in strength, the duo began to contemplate a strategy that would win them this battle for good. While they were at it, Tsukumi just arrived, so Julie decided to stand for her partner, but the latter was faster in coming to Julie's aid. Julie protested against it at first, but eventually realized that Kokono was up to something by provoking Tsukumi into attacking him with more intensity. Just as Tsukumi thought she was on the verge of destroying Kokono's blaze, Julie came in to pin her down, allowing room for Kokono to deliver the final blow not to his teacher, but to her blaze, which was shattered to pieces. Although injured, Kokono couldn't help but celebrate his victory with Julie the next morning. The fact that their I too strategy had paid off, as well as the rescue of Torasaki and Tatsuno and the apprehension of Professor Tsukumi, Kokono could be at ease for the time being. By the time Julie attempted to treat his wounds by pinning him to the ground, Takabana and Hotaka entered their room and found themselves in one of those out-of-context situations, and the rest is history. That night, Kokono woke up from that same nightmare before heading out to the balcony, where Julie couldn't help but wonder who Otoha is, which Kokono refused to answer and went back to bed. Seeing how stubborn her partner is, Julie decided to reveal her back to him, which had a deep scar that carries her own story as well. At a nearby lake, a certain butler named Sarah was waiting for her mistress, Lilith Bristol, to come out of the water to tell her that the preparations are complete to meet her kindred. At the dormitory, Kokono woke up after dreaming about the scar that Julie had on her back, before realizing that he's touching on a flat surface, which God forbid if I'm gonna tell you what it is. As he tried to get his hands off his ally's vanguard, Julie grabbed it closer, only to wake up with this poor fella in a sorry state that he ended up falling from his bed. Eventually, Kokono went on his knees, begging for forgiveness and telling this meatball-loving girl about the chain of events that led him to this situation, which included his lack of experience with women. Yes, Kokono is self-aware of being an utter loser. Nevertheless, Julie didn't make a scene, as she admitted that it's partially her fault too for moving to his bed without telling him. Fortunately for us, this Uno reverse game of apologies ended with a single good morning from both sides. On their way to class, the duo were joined by Takabana and Hotaka, who were surprised upon seeing Torasaki and Tatsuno there. Torasaki himself was also surprised to learn that Takabana is aware of what happened to him and his partner, but it all made sense when Kokono revealed that it was Takabana and Hotaka that came to their rescue when Kokono and Julie failed to get out of the building quickly, so Torasaki and Tatsuno thanked them for their help on that day. After a comical display of absurd behavior from Torasaki bowing to someone as a sign of gratitude, Takabana began to wonder about the reasoning behind Tsukumi's sudden shift in her demeanor. Just as everyone else began to think of an answer to this question, Tsukumi entered the room, to the utter shock of everyone inside the class. Understandably, Kokono and the others confronted Tsukumi about why she's back, only to refuse answering any impolite figure of speech to her as an instructor, especially with Tsukumo Sakuya arriving. Kokono addressed his questions to Tsukumo, but she claimed that she decided to rehire her because no unaliving had actually been taking place. On top of that, Tsukumo figured that having Tsukumi's students being able to defeat their teacher had asserted Tsukumi's skills as an instructor, which is why she decided to keep her. After all, this would serve the greater good of reaching absolute duo. To Tsukumo, the end justifies the means. If that wasn't enough, Tsukumo announced a level 2 rite of sublimation for Kokono and the others in the next few days. With that out of the way, Kokono and the others got back to class, but Kokono in particular was not able to focus on the lesson, and Julie was aware of that. That was the case until Lilith entered the classroom abruptly and rushed towards Kokono to have a word with him in private. Kokono and Torasaki argued against it, but Lilith had a special permission to do as she pleased. Seeing that he relented, Lilith remembered to introduce herself as a British transfer student. Once the two sat in a remote area to have some tea, Lilith demanded Kokono to abandon his duo to become hers instead, since she's British. I mean a nutcase, I mean an exception, so no school rules can be applied to her. In response, Kokono agreed to everything she said, and decided that he won't take her offer and left, much to Lilith's shock. Unfortunately for Kokono, however, he found himself doing God knows how many 4 kilometers laps for skipping class. Once he was done, Kokono went to have a shower, where Julie was about to join him, hadn't he denied her access. Once the two sat together to have some apple tea, Julie requested that they sleep together once again. Kokono refused, and then moved on to change the topic, by requesting that they change their pace by going somewhere out of the campus. Seeing that their date had been scheduled, Kokono believed that he succeeded in distracting Julie, except he didn't. The next morning, the two went on their date, where Julie was impressed by the sight of seagulls flying next to them. In fact, it was thanks to Hotaka's help that Kokono made up his mind over what places he should visit, which made both him and Julie thankful. Not too long after entering the mall, Kokono asked Julie to stay next to him, before finding out that she's being kidnapped by a horde of elementary school gnomes. For that reason, Julie decided to hold on to Kokono's hand as if she's holding on to dear life. Their presence had got everyone's attention in the mall, until they found a shop to attend. Even the vendor at the shop was excited at the idea that Kokono is having such a beautiful girlfriend, who became even cuter in every new attire she tried. To which Julie paid for them using her school ID. With the shopping spree over, and the clothes being sent to the school compound, the duo decided to go on a little stroll for the time being, where they had so much fun, just as much as I did when Julie got taken again by the horde of school gnomes. Nevertheless, the two sat down to have some ice cream, where they tried each other's, until Kokonoe realized that having his rum ice cream got Julie drunk. From afar, Takabana and Hataka were witnessing these events transpiring, only to misinterpret them once again as engaging in mischievous activities, until they found themselves surrounded by 4 crooks. Things escalated quickly between the girls and these losers to the point that Kokonoe came into their rescue. Before he could do anything, however, Lilith came from a corner and decided to roleplay as an American using her blaze, thus leaving Kokonoe taken aback. Now that the girls are here, it seems like there's no need for Kokonoe to help Julie with getting her undergarments, except they were horrified when they found that he's still tagging along from behind the curtain. The next day at school, Takabana and Hataka learned about what Lilith had done in the mall. It didn't make sense to them just as it was too incredibly complex to get a gunfire as a blaze, but it started making sense when remembering that Lilith is an exception. As for this nutcase of a girl, she was in her room taking care of her gun, while daydreaming about duoing with Kokonoe. At the pool, Takabana, Torasaki and Tatsuno couldn't help but flex their new set of skills to the entire class, while Kokonoe couldn't help but think of how he didn't feel any difference after taking an injection at the nursery room. Even Hataka got a major boost in her strength, that she had a major lead in her racing against other swimmers at the pool, which she claimed that it was all done thanks to Kokonoe's emotional support. With Takabana coming into the conversation, Hataka finally became convinced that she did indeed go through her hard work. Before she could say a word, however, Tsukumi decided to butt in to talk about her own level up, which has something to do with her massive Hollywood hills. Just as Takabana began to chastise Kokonoe for what she thought of as looking at her the wrong way, Julie was now making a grandiose in the pool. Everyone was impressed by that at first until they realized that Julie can't even swim. Despite how surprising that was, no one was willing to judge the girl for trying to swim for the first time, except for Hataka, who began to wish that she couldn't swim. Once they got out of the pool, Kokonoe excused himself from Julie's company for a moment, after taking notice of Lilith's presence. Although he absolutely hated her guts, Kokonoe was still wondering about the reason this tea-loving British girl is skipping classes, to which he learned that she did already finish school long ago, and that she's now attending it to kill some time and to fulfill her obsession over him. Aware that Kokonoe is seeking answers about what she did at the mall yesterday, Lilith decided to answer him once he follows her without asking questions. To where, you might ask? To a park called Deathland, of course, while leaving Julie behind to get the brunt of humiliation from Tsukumi and Takabana for ditching his partner. So while he's forced to have fun with Lilith, Julie is left alone to figure out what's going on. By the evening, Lilith was still full of energy, while Kokonoe got mentally drained to the point he seems like he's having PTSD, which made him unable to say no to getting into a shooting horror house, where he was impressed by her shooting skills, much more by her backstory with hunting as her hobby and how viral it is in her home country, which got her lots of experience with using weapons. If you're getting confused, Lilith is British. Once the game was over, Kokonoe couldn't help but start feeling more sympathetic towards Lilith, who's, for better or worse, acting like a little kid. With fireworks finally starting, the guy decided to finally ask about her public usage of Blaze yesterday, to which Lilith considered it as a natural thing to do with her duo, namely him. As Lilith kept on bragging about herself being his gun, while he serves as her shield, she offered to let him become her duo once more. Not too long after, Kokonoe finally got back to the dormitory, which turned out to be closed. After being called by Julie to jump to the balcony, he hid from the dorm's patrol with Julie for a moment. Once they were in the clear, Kokonoe revealed to Julie what happened between him and Lilith so far, including his rejection to her offer, which she didn't take well. Julie, on the other hand, appreciated Kokonoe's loyalty and expressed it by getting closer to him to cover from the cold weather. Meanwhile, Hataka's concern over Kokonoe's sudden disappearance got her to act in an unbelievable manner. The next morning, Kokonoe got to do his punishment for skipping class yesterday, which left him exhausted by the time he got back to class. Nevertheless, Tsukumi proceeded in making an announcement about her class challenging second-year students in an inter-class battle. As for what this event is called, it's known as the Mordraco. Second-year students are known for being notoriously strong. To make matters worse, this class is made of level 2 and 3s, so their task will include fighting together as a class instead of doing so as duos. Obviously, the entire first-year class was left speechless at how tall this order is, especially as second-year students were flexing their skills in the arena. Kokonoe and Julie, on the other hand, were excited on top of being undaunted, just as Torasaki, Tatsuno, Takabana, and Hataka were. Suddenly, a savage nutcase appeared in the arena, demanding that Mordraco start immediately. Second-year students were initially abhorred at this display of arrogance, but seeing that she used her blaze to shoot one of their students had started something ungodly. As Kokonoe figured, Lilith managed to single-handedly win the event on behalf of the entire first-year class, much to their surprise. This had also posed a problem for Tsukumo, as her entire event is now laying in shambles thanks to a certain British snowflake. As a compromise, Lilith offered to challenge the entire first class on her own in her own event, where the order of the day will be surviving. Now, in case you didn't notice, Lilith had moved from being an arrogant nutcase to becoming completely bonkers, as she left her class with no other choice but to agree to challenge her. And so they did later that night. Some of the students tried to pull a sneak attack against Lilith, but it failed miserably, as this group of students got defeated and law enforcers watching the chain of events taking place from their helicopter. Lilith encountered her now arch-nemesis Kokonoe. Before they get to fight, Kokonoe believed that it's best to apologize to her for not apologizing properly for rejecting her offer. Despite that, Kokonoe also assured Lilith that he wants her to fight using her full strength, hoping that they'd both reach an understanding to become better friends in the future. Lilith thought that Kokonoe might have lost his mind, but ended up accepting his apology before beginning their duel in earnest. Kokonoe managed to repel all direct hits shot at him until Takabana and Tatsuno came into the scene. However, Julie's arrival into the scene was earlier than planned, and Lilith capitalized on that and moved on to her next objective. As for the others, Takabana suggested they could either go after her or wait here to intercept her. The boys chose the latter, and so they began their journey to hunt down this delusional nutcase in two groups. Kokonoe's group was shocked upon finding lots of fallen students after a brief inspection, which gave away the idea that Lilith is definitely somewhere nearby, but they still needed to figure out where she is exactly. It didn't take them long to get their answer, in the form of Tatsuno being shot down. Kokonoe rushed immediately to deal with her, but Lilith tricked him to escape, promising to deal with him last. Julie wasn't amused by this, so she attacked Lilith, only to find herself getting distracted and eventually pacified. Lilith got upset when she saw Kokonoe rush to rescue his duo, so she shot her. And the damage could have been done hadn't Takabana arrived just in time to save Julie, thus giving Kokonoe the chance to go after Lilith. Once they're in the safe, it became clear that Takabana got shot in her endeavor to save Julie. The latter was sorry for being the reason her friend got attacked, but Takabana didn't mind, since that's what friends do. Takabana was also concerned about the reason why Julie is being overzealous, but the most pressing matter for now was taking down this cocky nutcase, to which after a brief discussion, everyone took their position, with Kokonoe being at the spotlight. To his surprise, Julie wanted to have a brief discussion with Kokonoe about what bothers her. As expected, Julie was worried that if Kokonoe acknowledges Lilith's strength after this event, he might be open to the idea of becoming duos with her, despite rejecting her twice before. In response, Kokonoe promised her that he always wanted to be by Julie's side, and that he'll always be by her side no matter what. This brief moment of serenity got interrupted instantly by Lilith, who learned that those who are still able to fight will fight to the last. The final clash of this event is now inevitable. Julie and Torasaki were able to attack in perfect sync to pin Lilith. Despite Julie's injury, she was still able to repel Lilith's attacks. Torasaki wasn't doing as well, which got Kokonoe to get involved to the point he got shot. Although not eliminated yet, Kokonoe seemed to have got Lilith where he wanted her to be, so after destroying the floor, Lilith seemed to be stuck in the open. Just as she seemed to be finally pinned though, Lilith managed to overpower Hataka, Torasaki, and Julie all at once. Just as she believed she's on the brink of victory, Julie turned out to be unharmed thanks to the shield she was wearing under her clothes, thus getting the chance to strike the final blow against Lilith. Although she still wanted to settle the score with Kokonoe alone by now, she was shocked to find her nemesis being shot, by a real bullet no less. It turned out that it was someone named Kevin Wayfair that came in to take her under the order of the Master Armorer. When Lilith refused, Kevin decided to shoot her. Julie and Torasaki didn't sit idle, and went ahead to retaliate, only to be pacified by the other two Master Chief cosplayers. In the end, it only took Kevin the threat of unaliving Hataka that Lilith finally relented to going with him to see his master. Despite that, no one could bear seeing such a thing transpiring and doing nothing about it. After all, Lilith is still their classmate. To that end, Kokonoe went ahead with his classmates, except for Hataka, to the rescue of Lilith. When confronted about it, Lilith argued against it, but Kokonoe insisted that he save her to continue their clash in the foreseeable future. Meanwhile, Kevin was having none of it, so he ordered his goons to shoot at the young fella, who after bearing the brunt of their shots have used what's left of his power to punch the floor. Nothing happened initially, much to Kevin's amusement, before fate pulling an Uno reverse card at him and collapsed out of nowhere. As Lilith was falling, Kokonoe managed to catch up to her. Seeing that Kevin was trying to hurt Lilith, Julie and Tora came in just in time to prevent the Master Chief cosplayers from stepping in before the rivals put a decisive end to Kevin. Despite the two of them being severely beaten up, they still agreed to clash with all their might, or rather what's left of their strength. In the aftermath of this fight, Kevin came out of the rubble just fine, telling his superiors about the failures he had, only to be told that he collected plenty of data about his target, even though he still has yet to collect more data about the person behind the Blaze Diabolica. When asked about the exceeds, however, Kevin couldn't help but be amused. The next morning, Julie and the others were checking on Kokonoe's condition, since he was badly injured after yesterday's fight, before getting joined by Lilith a while later. In fact, she came to thank him and everyone else for her rescue, as well as reminding him that she hopes to become friends now that they've clashed at full strength, which Kokonoe gracefully accepted. A few days later, Hataka was busy showering and thinking of how useless she was during that night's incident, when Takabana decided to join her. The latter couldn't bear seeing her duo being down, so she urged her to get back to being the cheerful Hataka that they love, which got her to have some funny ideas the moment she heard the term love. Later that day, Kokonoe was on a boat with Julie laying on his lap, as she was trying to recover from her seasickness during their summer camp. Nevertheless, Kokonoe was positive that this summer camp will be like no other. Eventually, Hataka joined the scene to check on Julie. Just as she was about to sit next to Kokonoe, the boat bumped into something that made Hataka fall with her vanguards, hitting on the fella big time. A moment later, Torasaki and his alpha male wannabe came in to invite them for a meeting with Tsukumi, which Takabana came in a moment later herself to remind them. Once they got to the meeting, Tsukumi made a big announcement. Every student will have to jump down the boat and swim all the way to the aisle, where they will have to get to their goal there. If they manage to level up, then they'll be saved for the last term right, but if they fail, the failures will end up dragging their duos along with them. Once she was done with this announcement, the entire class was thrown in the sea. Thanks to Julie, Kokonoe seemed to be lagging far behind. Just as he was assuring her that everything is fine, a helicopter came out of nowhere, carrying a savage Lilith, who was late after looking for her swimsuit, before jumping right into the sea. It didn't take long for her to get into trouble with Julie, which made Kokonoe decide to step in. When Lilith learned about their goal, she decided to race Kokonoe and Julie to the aisle. Once the trio got there, Kokonoe were physically spent. Julie was also concerned after her clothes got wet. Just as she was about to take them off, Kokonoe hit off the panic button, which made Julie realize her mistake, and change location of where she'll dry out. When it came to Lilith, she made it clear that she's joining the event on her own will, and that she doesn't mean to stand in his way. Seeing that he's willing to thank her for her help earlier, Lilith asked him to do her a certain favor which God forbid if I'll mention here. Kokonoe himself promptly refused. Before long, Kokonoe noticed that Julie is having trouble with her clothes being blown away by the wind to the sea once again. Elsewhere, Takabana seemed to be doing well, with Hataka slightly holding her back. By now Hataka seemed to be self-aware of that, realistically speaking. Nevertheless, Takabana assured her that she's wrong, and that she's still her duo, so if she felt down on herself, she'll be feeling down on her duo as well. Hearing this, Hataka finally became relieved. That evening, Kokonoe and his harem had reached the training camp. Before they could get there, Kokonoe decided to take off his shirt and cover Lilith's feet to avoid her getting injured. Of course, having her sweet talking to Kokonoe got on Julie's nerves, to the point that she thought of taking another route that seemed easier. Before she knew it, her skirt got caught on a stick, but fortunately no wrongdoing took place. The trio couldn't catch a breath, however, as they got instantly attacked from the woods. It turned out that they were getting attacked by 4 ninjas using their blazes. Eventually, they found themselves drawn deeper in the woods, where these ninjas would have the terrain advantage, as they could hit and run without the exceeds being able to retaliate. Indeed, the girls were put mostly on the defensive. Despite that, Julie and Lilith's combined efforts got them the upper hand suddenly, by stripping the ninjas of their terrain advantage, thus leaving Lilith to deal the final blow. Takabana and Hataka also got attacked, but things didn't go much better for them, as Hataka's struggle to reach out to Takabana got the latter caught in deep trouble. Seeing that her friend is now surrounded and horrifically outnumbered, Hataka began to remember how useless she was during the mall incident a few days ago, which got her to get a grip of herself and finally put her blaze for good use. Kokonoe, on the other hand, had his fair share of trouble, as he wasn't just dealing with an assassin, but a lot of traps that she did set in place. He managed to get himself out of danger with ease, but just as he was about to deal the final blow, he discovered that the attacker was none other than Emery. Although it was a good surprise that they met, Emery was looking forward to having Kokonoe remove his hand off her Mount Fuji. That night, it turned out that the losers at the opening ceremony rite were not actually kicked out for good, but rather taken to another remote branch of the school, and now the 2 branches are having joint exercises, which was an opportunity worth celebrating. While the rest of the class busy having the time of their lives, with Tsukumi in particular gathering all the meat she could lay her hands on, Emery revealed how surprised she was initially for getting admitted in this remote branch, which despite the rigorous routine in it, helped her improve on many aspects. Before Kokonoe could say a word, Julie arrived to ask him for some meat, since all of it was over. Luckily for her, Kokonoe gave her a sausage, which she found tasty. Lilith joined the scene a moment later, with 2 large plates full of meat in her hands, asking Kokonoe to feed her. Instead, she found Julie feeding her, which although she didn't take it kindly, she still enjoyed having some tasty meat. As for Kokonoe, he had more important matters to attend to with Tsukumo, who was already nearby. For Tsukumo, it doesn't matter what she does, as long as her path reaches absolute duo. Hataka, on the other hand, couldn't bear to be called by her former opponents as an impressive fighter, but it only took her Takabana's interference to believe in that, which made her so flustered that she decided to get some more food. On the food table, she ran into Kokonoe, where she was this close to confessing her feelings to him, before getting called out by their friends. While everyone was having fun, Kevin and his master Edward Walker were in their final stage of making their device, but they're still lacking one last piece to complete their creation. In order to do so, Edward requested that this matter remains confidential between the two of them, which Kevin agreed to. For now, the students decided to make camp at the school's compound. Julie was glad at today's turn of events, but also learned a great lesson. As such, Julie decided to hand him over her undergarments. Later that night, while everyone was sleeping soundly, Kokonoe woke up to find his face stuck between two squishy hills, before figuring that that's Lilith sleeping next to him just like God had created her. It also didn't take him long to find out that Julie was sleeping the same way as Lilith right next to him, which made Kokonoe snap out and get his distance from both girls. To make matters worse, Takabana came in to wake them up for their morning routine, which ended up as you might expect. After sunrise, Takabana rushed her way to Kokonoe once again to apologize for the misunderstanding as always. If anything, the scene she made had gotten Kokonoe some unwanted attention from Torasaki, Tetsuno, and most importantly Emori, who Julie was about to spill the beans to, had Kokonoe not prevented her from saying another word. For now, Hataka couldn't help but get everyone to circle around before Tsukumi gets mad, which they did, despite their resentment for Tsukumi, which Emori couldn't comprehend. As the day progressed, Hataka seemed to be finally cheerful, as she believed that that's what being in love could do to someone. This remained this way at least until Tsukumi declared that the next day would be the last of this training camp. With Lilith going to have some skincare session, Julie accompanying her, and Torasaki leaving him alone to take a dive, Hataka found herself alone with her crush. After a brief and awkward conversation, the two decided to meet at the most fun place in this isle, the beach. In fact, Kokonoe was on edge the whole time there, since he's technically the only guy there, because Torasaki was in the middle of his sweet dreams, while Tetsuno was busy training for the muscles god. Eventually, Kokonoe was joined by Julie, who he found cute, with Lilith, Takabana, Hataka, Tsukumi, and Emori following up. Aside from Tsukumi engaging in God knows what she's doing, Lilith suggested they join him in having some fun. As for what that fun is, it turned out to be reviewing their bikinis, which were followed up by everyone jumping right into the sea for a quick dive, except for Kokonoe, who was not allowed to unless he reviews Tsukumi's style. Seeing that he was indifferent to her, Tsukumi was open to the idea of getting rid of her student for good.
It should have been me, not him!
From afar, Hataka seemed to be bothered by the comments made at how close Tsukumi seemed with Kokonoe, which didn't escape Emori's notice. Nevertheless, that didn't stop anyone from having fun overall, even if it meant trouble for Kokonoe. Speaking of which, seeing that he's sitting alone, Hataka decided to suggest that Kokonoe swim with her. The fella jumped to assist Julie with swimming. He found that she's barely able to make any progress despite her best effort, before being hit by a wave that got her rid of her toppings, which fortunately for her and Kokonoe, the latter barely saw a thing before turning his back. Eventually, Kokonoe found himself stuck in a saga to bring Julie her cover-up back. Lilith came in to cling herself on him. With Tsukumi castigating him from afar, Emori couldn't help but begin wondering about his relationship with everyone else in this group, but more importantly for her, she wondered about what's going on with Hataka. That evening, Kokonoe couldn't help but enjoy having a hot bath, before learning that the girls were having theirs just behind him, and overhearing lots of unnecessary infos, such as the size of Hataka's grabbers, which made Tsukumi consider her as her rival, before switching her attention at Takabana, who decided to come in Hataka's defense, with Julie joining in for the grabbing session, much to Emori's amusement. Speaking of Emori, she had already figured Hataka's feelings out, much to the latter's surprise. Emori also said that Hataka got some serious competition with all the girls here, especially Julie. On the other hand, Hataka also figured that Emori had feelings for Kokonoe too. This was true, as Emori and Kokonoe clicked the moment they met, but fate had another say in the matter. Seeing that she had no more chance, Emori gave the green light for Hataka to confess her feelings for Kokonoe. By the time everyone left the hot spring, Hataka was contemplating how she could address her feelings to him when she suddenly slipped and hurt her ankle. Seeing this, Emori chastised Kokonoe into helping out his injured friend, which he did. Emori didn't stop at that, she managed to get the rest of the group to go on ahead, thus leaving Hataka the chance and the setup she desperately needed to talk her heart out. For starters, Hataka managed to get Kokonoe to start calling her by her first name from now on. Once they reached a position where they could see the sunset, Hataka requested she sit down. Now that they're finally walking on shore, Hataka finally confessed her feelings. Just as he was on the verge of accepting her feelings, Kokonoe was immediately struck by his traumatic past, which made him change his mind instantly. Hataka tried to keep a hold of herself, but failed so miserably that she ran away instantly. Elsewhere, Lilith was discussing the reason behind joining this school with Tsukumo, as well as her connection to the Blaze Diabolica, before concluding that a certain old man is definitely up to something by tonight, which is why Tsukumo came to this school branch in the first place, who had managed to make Kokonoe serve her bigger plan without him knowing. Speaking of Kokonoe, he was busy reflecting on what happened between him and Hitaka when he suddenly noticed that the camp is getting attacked by a horde of soldiers who were led by none other than Kevin. Despite being hopelessly outnumbered, Takabana and the handful of people around her were able to deal with this horde of Master Chief cosplayers, despite also being worrying about Hitaka. Inside headquarters, Sarah briefed Lilith, Tsukumi and Tsukumo about the new soldiers that are now attacking the camp. It didn't take them long to figure out what Edward was up to, which was a first-round selection. As for the main branch, it was getting raided by these same soldiers as well, thus denying them any reinforcements from there. For that, Tsukumo sent Tsukumi to deal with the threat. By now, the effect of the overwhelming numbers began to show up on the students. Suddenly, Kokonoe arrived for the rescue, as well as Tsukumi, who's now eager to get rid of her enemies now more than ever, especially with her limiter being turned off for the time being. As the soldiers became aware that they're fighting an exception, they found themselves unable to put a stop to Tsukumi's wrath. After Firefly flexing her strength to Kokonoe, Tsukumi went ahead to continue her witch hunt. Just as Julie suggested that she accompany Kokonoe to tend to their friend's wounds, Takabana arrived to see if Hitaka was with them or not. While these developments were taking place, Tsukumo was surprised to learn that the assault on the main branch had been brutally repelled by a single man. They couldn't get the chance to celebrate their victories on both branches, however, because Kevin had rushed inside headquarters to take Tsukumo with him. Lilith didn't sit idle as she stood in Kevin's way and pacified two of his comrades. Still, Kevin still had a few aces left up his sleeve. Noticing an explosion coming from the headmistress's room, Takabana ordered the rest of the team to check on Tsukumo and her companions, while she looked for Hitaka with Emery's help. Once Kokonoe got inside the mansion, he found Sarah tending to the injured Lilith, who was glad upon seeing Kokonoe, although shamed at the same time for allowing Tsukumo to accompany Kevin. Now Kokonoe and Julie had their priorities changed to rescue Tsukumo immediately. Meanwhile, Kevin was getting increasingly confident that he had his victory secured. However, he was surprised to see that Kokonoe and Julie had caught up to him. When asked about his reasoning to attack the school, Kevin refused to answer. To add insult to injury, he made it clear that now it's about to be dependent on Kokonoe's very existence in life, which he now wants to get rid of. Seeing that both Kokonoe and Julie refused to comply, fighting became inevitable. Although Kevin was able to repel all of the duo's attacks with ease, his arrogance blinded him briefly, so much so that Kokonoe managed to strike a devastating blow against him. However, Kevin was not done yet, because his new unit gave him superior protection than his comrades, whom he's looking down on. Aware that Kevin is proving to be a tough nut to crack, Kokonoe decided to step up his game as well, and began to intensify his attacks, with Julie matching up with hers as well, although it nearly costed her life, hadn't Kokonoe arrived just in time to save her. Kokonoe tried to attack Kevin one more time with his full might, but found himself stabbed in the thigh. Not bearing to see her duo injured, Julie charged at her opponent, only to find herself knocked unconscious. Just as he thought he was about to deliver her the final blow, Kevin was surprised to see Kevin coming to her rescue. Angered by his promise to protect Julie with his life, Kevin attacked the already injured Kokonoe in his left shoulder, before proceeding to torture the boy. Julie, on the other hand, couldn't bear to lose another dear person once again. As such, she stood her ground, unlocked a new level of her skills, before beginning to outright skewer Kevin mercilessly, and she could have done the same to Kokonoe, who asked her to stop, hadn't she lost consciousness. After reminding Kokonoe of how much of a weakling he is, Kevin was called out to retreat, since the kidnap of Blaze Diabolica no longer became a necessity. Although frustrated that all his efforts were all for naught, Kevin complied, after learning of his opponent's identity. In the aftermath of this devastating attack, both branches got occupied with tending to the wounds of their comrades. For her part, Lilith was glad that both Kokonoe and Julie were true to their word in bringing Tsukumo back with them. However, Lilith had still yet to figure out who the rebels truly were after. Elsewhere, Julie revealed to her duo the backstory of her father, who despite being a hero, had lost a battle, and his life along with it. As for the murder of her father, he gave her the scar she has on her back. Since then, Julie began to seek strength, hoping to avenge her dad one day. Just as she was on the verge of tears, Kokonoe thanked her for saving his life earlier, thus strengthening his bond with Julie. While Kokonoe was acknowledging his weaknesses, Hitaka's self-awareness of her own, the lack of self-esteem, and the desire to seek validation from Kokonoe made her an easy prey by Edward Walker, who assured her that he'll grant her all the strength she needs to fulfill all her wishes. As Kokonoe and the others left the island the next day, the guy couldn't stop thinking of the reason behind Hitaka's sudden disappearance, as well as the guilt he felt for making Takabana concerned for losing her duo, who despite pleading to Tsukumi to stay to search for her, had to abide to heading back home. Once they reached the main branch, Kokonoe got to train with Takabana immediately, as he assured himself that everything will be just fine, with Emery's promises to take care of the search for Hitaka. Apparently Takabana was the most concerned with her duo's disappearance, that she nearly strangled Kokonoe out of life altogether, hadn't Tsukumi stepped in for the rescue. Things didn't go well past training either for Takabana, as she still couldn't stop believing that Hitaka isn't here, thus making the poor Takabana even more devastated. Things inside the classroom were not any better, as the students there couldn't stop talking about Hataka's disappearance. While Kokonoe was lost in thoughts, Lilith came in to cut his rail of thoughts, followed up by Julie, who couldn't stop making ironic thrusts at Lilith. Seeing that Takabana just entered the class, Lilith immediately went to force a reaction out of her, which despite her actions being inappropriate, but it seemed to be working, not only for Takabana, but for Julie as well, who covered Kokonoe's eyes to not see such things transpiring. That night, Kokonoe had another nightmare about everything that's bothering him so far. Julie was alarmed by how disturbed her duo was, so she went ahead and hugged him to make him feel more at ease. The following day, Kokonoe was thanked by Tsukumo for coming to her rescue the other day. As such, she decided to reward him by allowing him to undergo the level 4 rite. Kokonoe was initially skeptical. Just as Tsukumo thought she convinced him to accept, Kokonoe began to worry about losing control of himself, so he refused once again. As a result, Tsukumo gave him the injection and left him the choice of taking it whenever he pleases, while reminding him that this world will never do things the way he wants. Lastly, Tsukumi briefed Kokonoe about an upcoming conference where the equipment master will be present. For his part, Kokonoe was left in so much doubt that it showed right in front of Julie, who was getting increasingly concerned over his mental state. The next morning, the school was left empty, as it was guarded by elite graduates instead. The students became aware of how important this conference is from the sheer presence of guards in the academy's compound, which included level 3 students as well. While most of the guards were positive that nothing will happen, Lilith was of a different mind, especially after getting a personal invitation from Tsukumo to the conference. Before she knew it, Kokonoe and Julie came in to ask her an important question regarding Equipment Smith and the Rain Conference. Not wanting to turn her beloved Kokonoe down, she spilled the beans about Smith's true identity, who's a big shot in a certain military organization, as well as the head of the infamous military corps, more known as the Rebels. His ultimate goal from this conference is nothing more than absolute duo, which is something that Tsukumo is seeking. In simpler terms, absolute duo is a state beyond the limit of soul that a blaze wielder can reach, which is the very raison d'etre for this academy. Speaking of Tsukumo, she entered the conference room, where she found Aogi, Clovis, Yuyugo and Beatrix waiting for her, before being followed up by Edward Walker, much more known as Equipment Smith. After beginning the conference, Edward made the proposal that they all join in an alliance, which despite the other attendees accepting to join, Tsukumo rejected. After all, their paths were so different that they can never align, and so will the results be either way. As he was also reminded of his past losses to Tsukumo's grandfather, Edward couldn't help but get offended. Eager to prove Tsukumo wrong, Edward suggested they play a game, and no, it's none of the Jigsaw brutal games. Edward suggested he send his rebels to attack the academy, and whoever wipes out the other team first wins. Hearing this, Tsukumo agreed instantly. Meanwhile, Kokonoe was still having second thoughts about his pursuit for power, but Lilith argued against that, as she believed that you'll have to sacrifice some things if you want to gain certain other things, despite how sad that may be. Nevertheless, Kokonoe, being the brick wall that he is, being Kokonoe, insisted on refusing to admit that. Suddenly, everyone at the school compound was alerted to the aircraft's roars in the sky, before learning about the deal that was signed between Tsukumo and Edward. That evening, students stood face to face with Kevin and his Halo fanboys, when suddenly Hataka came into the scene and stood by Kevin's side. Takabana was relieved to see that her duo is alright, but Lilith could smell that something is not right about her for obvious reasons. Before long, Hataka switched from her school uniform to her new fighting custom, before declaring to Kokonoe that she's finally stronger, much to his horror. Eager to demonstrate her powers, Hataka brought up her blaze and attacked the guards that stood between her and her former classmates. Seeing this, Kokonoe was furious as he asked Kevin about what he did to his friend. With Hataka now charging head-on towards Kokonoe, the latter could do nothing but watch. He could have been a goner hadn't Julie come in just in time to save him. Seeing that Hataka is now threatening Julie for coming to Kokonoe's rescue, the rest of the team decided to join the fray on Kokonoe's side. It didn't take long for Takabana to figure out that Hataka's strength is coming from the rebels' equipment, and she was right on the money for that answer. Seeing the level of destruction that Hataka had caused, Edward began to feel emboldened in front of the other conference members, while continuously bragging that the fusion between an Exceed and a unit is the peak of human research so far. Not being able to see a jerk laying his hands on her beloved Hataka, Takabana tried to appeal to her to come back with her, only for the latter to respond by hitting Takabana before starting to insult her for being weak. The situation became even more dire when Exceeds began to notice that Takabana got severely injured from the attack. In contrast, Edward couldn't help but start squeezing the screws further on Tsukumo, hoping to get her to agree to strike an alliance with her. What he didn't expect, however, was for Tsukumo to reach a consensus of getting rid of Edward's insider in her academy, which turned Edward into a laughingstock in the eyes of the other attendees. On the other hand, Takabana was still in denial about Hataka being the one that asked for this, only for Hataka to reveal that Takabana knew nothing about her, as well as a certain idiot rejecting her. Not being able to hear another word from a certain blonde bigshot wannabe, Kokonoe summoned his blaze and went into the fray, only to find Hataka attacking him time and again, and she could have cut him down hadn't the rest of the team arrived just in time for long enough to rethink their entire plan. With everyone else being cast aside temporarily, Hataka went back to focusing on attacking Kokonoe with all her might. Seeing this, Kevin decided to pick some of his Halo fans to take down Tsukumo in person, while leaving Hataka to quote-unquote clean out the trash. Just as she was on the verge of taking down Kokonoe, Takabana finally snapped back into reality and halted Hataka from laying a finger on him. Instead, Takabana urged the others to hold Kevin down while she deals with Hataka herself. With everyone finally gone, Hataka began to get infuriated that Takabana is getting in her way. By the time Kokonoe and the others arrived at the conference building, they found a horde of rebels before them, which didn't take Torasaki and Lilith much effort to deal with, who left the important task of saving Tsukumo to Julie and Kokonoe. Once the latter two got in the building, they found Kevin waiting for them instead of going after Tsukumo. In fact, Kevin intentionally did that in hope of seeing the look of despair in Kokonoe's eyes. With the duo refusing to cave in for his demands, the fighting finally started. That night, the standoff between Hataka and Takabana continued. Takabana was willing to keep up with her duo until that borrowed power of hers has run its course, while trying to persuade Hataka to believe that her hard work was the reason she's been seeking strength, only to be violently hit by Hataken, who claimed that being in a duo with her was utter nonsense, and that her actual reason to seek strength was only to get noticed by Kokonoe. Only then Takabana began to grasp the size of the problem. Just as Hataka began to head to where Kokonoe is, she noticed that Takabana was not done yet, as she insisted that Hataka does not need that much power even if Kokonoe had already turned her down, not because she's weak per se, but because she's strong the way she is. This finally caused a crack in Hataka's new equipment, which began to expand further the more Takabana began to admit how ashamed she was feeling for thinking that she was always standing for Hataka in every step of the way. As Hataka tried to resist it, Takabana mentioned that she still has her, who will always keep on standing by her side no matter what. As Hataka began to react violently to these words, Takabana stood her ground and moved on ahead to slap her duo, thus destroying the core of this equipment for good and bringing back her friend to her senses. I wish I could say the same about her clothes, but I digress. Amidst these developments, Kevin kept on trying to castigate them for leaving Takabana to deal with the fusion, as they were fully believing in the bond between duos. After a fair bit of fighting, Kevin was alerted that the new device ceased to function altogether. In response, he began to react violently by throwing explosives at Julie. Seeing that Kokonoe moved instantly to protect his duo, Kevin began to feel sadistically ecstatic as he called out for his Halo fans to take down the boy. By the time Julie woke up, she was horrified by seeing Kokonoe being severely injured, even though he was still holding his ground, much to Kevin's dismay. After reflecting on what happened so far, Kokonoe finally took the decision to inject himself with the dose that he got from Tsukumo. By the time Kevin gave the signal for the attack, Kokonoe got all the strength he needed to protect Julie and more. Kevin was left apoplectic by this sight, to the point he ordered his men to unalive Kokonoe. However, Torasaki and Lilith managed to get their way inside after a long struggle. In a last-ditch effort to turn the table, Kevin attacked, but found himself unable to do anything before the overwhelming power that Kokonoe retaliated with, thus securing the victory that the Academy so desperately needed, much to Edward's dismay, who was left as a sorry sight in the meeting room, while everyone left. Despite that, Tsukumo was wondering if Kokonoe will still live up to her expectations. In the aftermath of this match, Kevin was left lying on the ground in utter disbelief that he lost to such a pushover. But when Edward came in to punish him for turning him into a laughingstock, Kevin saw no point in serving him, so he took matters into his own hands and eliminated his master, before unlocking the ultimate level armor to take down Kokonoe. Although Kokonoe and his friends made it out of the building relatively safe on top of victorious, they did not expect that they'll find Kevin in front of them once again. Eager to prove himself, Torasaki attacked the psychopath, only for his blaze to get destroyed. Lilith tried to follow suit, only to find herself knocked unconscious. Before long, Kevin used his new armor to fly and blast the administration building into dust. Now that there's nothing between him and his new nemesis, Kevin began to attack the duo, which led him to throw Kokonoe all the way to the clock tower. Apparently Kevin was hoping to get Kokonoe to admit that he was wrong about protecting his duo, only for the latter to refuse. Just as he was thinking of an answer to such a question, Kevin found himself attacked by Julie, which despite her best effort in combining her attacks with Kokonoe, the two got absolutely nowhere. Seeing that his own attacks aren't effective against a level 4 exceed, Kevin began to shift his focus into attacking the entirety of the school with every innocent student in it. After a brief skirmish with Kokonoe, Kevin charged his guns to its fullest potential and began to attack the dormitory. Just as the students there were bracing for impact, Professor Tsukumi arrived in the nick of time to repel the incoming attack, which she did successfully, albeit it did cost her a lot of her strength. After Tsukumi's successful endeavor, Kokonoe and Julie ran deep into the woods to distract Kevin, before Julie jumped out of it back again to attack the villain. Although severely injured in one arm, Julie managed to get close enough to disable one of his guns for good. Was it worth it though? Not really, because being separated from her duo led Kokonoe to be too focused on protecting Julie from Kevin's gun, only to find himself being cut down. Julie was left badly enraged by the sight of her fallen comrade, so much so that she began to unleash her full might at Kevin, who ended up finding himself completely on the defensive. Despite his best efforts to retaliate, Kevin found his sword and his body cut down severely. Unarmed, critically injured, and with Julie on the verge of sending him to the afterlife, Kevin could do nothing but hope for a miracle to save him, which manifested in Kokonoe's sudden calls for Julie to stop. Kokonoe was aware that Julie was consumed by anger and that she was going to attack him. For that fact, he pulled out his shield and braced for impact. He was fully aware of how similar the two of them are, so he ended up letting go of his armor at one point to get Julie to come closer. Although she came at him with clear intents of elimination, she couldn't injure him at all, which allowed Kokonoe to hug her and get her back to her senses, thus ending this entire spiel for good, or so they thought. Kevin turned out to be so upset by this turn of events that he decided to get rid of the two once again, even though he figured that that would be pointless since he lost. For that, Kokonoe, who was joined by Julie this time, had pulled out their shield, which not only absorbed the brunt of Kevin's assault, but nullified it altogether after a while. Despite that, Kevin still refused to admit defeat, and began to gather as much strength as possible to eliminate both duos. In response, Kokonoe picked one of Julie's swords and rushed at his opponent, which he used to break Kevin's equipment for good, thus ending this saga for good. The next morning, repair work over the entire camp was taking place. In the hospital, however, Hataka went with everyone else to make sure that she apologized for dragging every single one of her classmates into this uncalled-for mess, which Kokonoe was completely fine with, as he assured her that he wants to get stronger with her, Takabana, Torasaki, and Tatsuno. Outside of his hospital room, they could see Tsukumi being hunted down by a bunch of fanboys and fangirls alike, after the show of might she made to protect them. Once recovered, Kokonoe couldn't help but join Lilith on one of her tea parties, where he was informed on Kevin's background, which included his fallen brother and shattered family. Aware that he must have been curious about Kevin, Lilith also decided to inform him that Julie had left the hospital today too, which made Kokonoe rush his way out to find her. As for Lilith, she learned that Tsukumo wanted to let him know of Kevin's past in hope of making his soul develop better, in order to reach absolute duo, that is. That evening, just as Kokonoe began to feel like he won't be able to find her, he remembered that there's one last place she could be at, the clock tower. Indeed, Julie was waiting for him there, where he further learned that the power that came out of Julie was not that of an Exceed, but they're called Awake. Julie was worried that Kokonoe might abandon her if he learned about that, but Kokonoe didn't hold a grudge. Instead, he apologized for failing to make her use that dark power of hers once again. With both sides finally admitting to their failures, they finally renewed their vow as a duo, and with that, the duo finally got back to living their normal life once again. That concludes the anime recap. As always, if you enjoyed, let me know down below and I'm out.